Hello guys and welcome back. So this is the render, and as you can see we have a lot of cool details, and we don't have any foam or anything yet, and this is just the water surface. You can see we're getting this nice diffuse variation from the velocity and vorticity. We're getting a cool refraction color variation with that mix that we created, and some cool reflection as well. I'd probably blur the reflection, the speculars a little bit more, and maybe even add a clear coat reflection pass. But one thing that I'm not seeing with this type of volumes, or rather I don't see very often, is the scattering of the surface. Right now you can see this base here has the same color throughout the entire as it goes deeper into the volume. Nothing happens to it. It has the same color, and we're not getting any refraction, any depth sense of this volume. It's not too deep, but we should expect to see some kind of scattering and maybe translucence to this. And in reality, that's what would happen. Let's say this is the thickness of the water. We have a lot of sand here, a lot of debris, a lot of particles, and when the ray travels through this volume, a lot of stuff can happen to it. It can hit a different particle or a different type of material and get refracted reflected back sooner, versus another ray that reaches all the way here. It's gonna reflect a different color because it may be darker here. The color of rays that gets reflected here is different from the one that gets reflected at the bottom of the surface. And so to create that, we need to actually render a volume render. We need to create some kind of volume render of this. I'm going to copy the mesh. We're going to keep this one for the main water look, and I'm going to call this fluid interior. It's an exact copy. Okay, I'm going to go to the geometry and turn on back face removal. I don't need that. And what we can do is we can take the geometry that we have, do a VDB from polygon, and we need a density field. And then that's pretty much it. We have a volume now, a representation of this, and we can render this using volume shader. But imagine you have a huge water surface or an ocean. It's pretty much impossible to create volume data for all of it. And right now, how much we have, it's not too high res, but let's say we have a huge river that stretches too far, or like 1 kilometer river, for example, that we need to render. We cannot do this. It's very expensive. So Mantra has, and Houdini has, a feature that can take any geometry, any enclosed geometry, and render it as a volume at render time. So we can actually do this conversion at render time. And I'm gonna preview. Actually, I don't have to preview. We can use this. And I'm going to go to the material, and I'm actually going to create a base volume shader from the library. Let's press the Alt-G shortcut, and if we go under, let me close it. So Alt-G to open this guy. It's opening on a different screen. If we scroll down to volumes, I'm going to use this uniform volume, which is the simplest volume shader we can get. Okay, it has pretty much nothing. And I'm going to give it a different color, actually a tinted color like this, to fake or mimic the color of the water. And I'm going to assign this to the water itself. And let's bring up the rendering dialog. I'm going to lower the resolution a bit, set this to 4:4, and for the object I don't want the water fluid mesh anymore. I just need the fluid interior. Actually, I should have called it water volume. Let's do that. Render water volume. Okay, so let's hit render. And let's see how this looks like. Let's make sure the shader is assigned. Cool. So you can see now it's rendering as an actual volume. It's not transparent, it's not reflective anymore, it's actually a volume. This is perfectly this is perfect for what we need. In certain cases, I would take this geometry and peek it in a little bit so that it doesn't overlap 100%. But for now, it worked here, so the shader didn't cause any issues. Sometimes both surfaces overlap and it can cause some rendering issues. And I'm going to lower the density of this volume. Okay, so it's a volume shader, so I'm going to lower the cloud density here. And I'm going to add a little bit of phase scattering to shift the color of the extincted absorbed ray or the exiting rays. I'm going to set that to 0.025 and let's hit render again. And what we want, let's go back here. What we want now is, say we have now this copy of the surface that is being rendered as volume. We don't want to see this actual pass. We don't want it to be visible. We just wanted it to be visible through the refraction rays, because this is our camera, okay? And we're never going to see this we're never going to hit this volume directly. It's always going to be below the water surface. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this pass here, and I'm going to set it in the forced phantom, and I'm going to turn back on the water itself, and that would be the fluid mesh. Okay, so this is with 0.5 depth, and I'm going to hit render. And now we should see this forced phantom means do not show this object, do not render this object, do not make it visible to the camera rays, only make it visible for shadowing, for refraction, for reflection. So if we had an object here, let's say a red sphere, we set it to phantom, we're not going to see it directly, but we're going to see it reflected on the water itself. And voila, this is the secret sauce for getting interesting water surface. So you can see, let me remove these images. Remove frame, and want to do a 1-to-1. So this is with the water. Yeah, it's fantastic. Very, very cool. So let's turn this off. Exclude object. Let's do another render. As see here, it's very dark in these areas, but here it's much more, it has that refraction feel to it, or the scattering feel to it. So this is without. You can see all that stuff. And this is without. And we're getting all this shadowing, everything pretty much to make this look photoreal. Okay, so now one thing left that is also very tricky to do. You see this, the geometry here is pure white. If we look here, it's white throughout the entire sim. And something that we see a lot in rivers or lakes is that anything that is underneath the water, it gets a tint of blue. Okay, any geometry, it gets a tint of blue. And we're going to create that in the geometry shader itself. So now we're going to start looking at rendering the geometry of the environment, and we're going to fake that blue tinting effect in there. I'm also going to apply it. So anything, let's say this, anything underneath this the base of the statue, for example, underneath the water, we want to give it a different tint than when it comes above the water. And we're going to fake that using the height of the geometry, the Y position of the shading points. Cool. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye-bye.